All right, music fans, welcome back. Harmless Dave here, talking about real music in real time for real people just like you and just like me. Gene Simmons, the guy who basically discovered Van Halen, has some interesting thoughts on how Eddie Van Halen almost joined Kiss back in 1982. It's a weird story that I hadn't heard. I'm sure a lot of people who have kept up with this better than I have probably knew about this, but Gene explains it, or at least the article here talks about it. By the way, if you want some great new music for your collection, this album by the band Pinnacle Point, it is called Symphony of Mind. If you're a fan of Kansas or Journey or a Deep Purple or music that's progressive but melodic, this is one of the best albums to come out in the year 2020. It will put a smile on your face. Pinnacle Point, Symphony of Mind. Now, back to the video. What's interesting about this article isn't the part of the article that gets highlighted here about what a great guy Eddie is, although, again, this confirms that pretty much everybody loved this guy. The way he smiles, how he's just kind of happy-go-lucky, and that's really who he is. And then he talks about Eddie having God-given talent. He says something a little bit weird. He says, every once in a while, God gets it right. I don't know. I don't know what Michael Sweet would have to say about that statement, but in any event, maybe poorly worded. He did a good job with Eddie Van Halen, I'll tell you that. He was a far better man than I'll ever be. That's the truth. Okay, so some humility there, but here's the interesting part of the article. Simmons has claimed in several interviews that he once had to talk Eddie Van Halen out of joining Kiss for 1982's Creatures of the Night album. Simmons said that is true, and he was very serious. He was so unhappy about how he and David Lee Roth were or weren't getting along. Now, what's interesting is I read Ted Templeman's book, and I'm thinking Ted would have known about this. Maybe he did and just felt like he didn't need to include it in the book. Maybe I skimmed over that part. I can't remember reading about Eddie Van Halen wanting to join Kiss. But Eddie was really unhappy about how he wasn't getting along with David Lee Roth. According to Simmons here, he says he couldn't stand him, meaning Roth, and he talks about drugs being rampant. And so Eddie took Gene to lunch right across the street from the record plant. Vinnie Vincent tagged along, and Eddie said, I want to join Kiss, and I don't want to fight with Roth anymore. I'm sick and tired of it. But I told him, Eddie, that's Gene saying this, there's not enough room in Kiss. Imagine if Eddie Van Halen joined Kiss, and then he had to put on some makeup. They would have had to make a new character for him, too. Gene says, and it's good advice, you need to be in a band where you can direct the music. You're not going to be happy in Kiss. Now, that's almost like Gene telling Eddie, look, me and Paul do the music. You need to be in a band where you can do the music. If you join Kiss, we'd have to allow you to direct the music, and there's not enough room for egos that big between Paul Stanley, Gene Simmons, and Eddie Van Halen, although I think they would just tell Eddie, hey, write this, and Eddie could write anything for them, and would have been interesting, but, you know, am I glad that Eddie stayed in Van Halen? Absolutely. I mean, it just doesn't make sense for Eddie to be in Kiss, but that's about, you know, how crazy, I guess, David Lee Roth made Eddie Van Halen. Obviously, they didn't even get along as of a few years ago. There's that interview, and I may try to find it, where Eddie Van Halen says, hey, he doesn't want to be my friend. And quite honestly, Roth, who posted something right away when Eddie passed, has been a little less complimentary in some ways. I mean, I'm sure he's got deep feelings for Eddie Van Halen, but these guys, they didn't get along, and it's well documented that they used to fight like cats and dogs even in the very early days. I give Roth a lot of credit for shaping the sound of the band. He takes a lot of credit as far as the songwriting and the arranging and where which chord is going to go here and there and so forth. But without Eddie Van Halen, it becomes kind of a vaudeville sort of thing, and you needed that yin and yang going back and forth between these two guys who had very different visions on what they were bringing to the table. So in any event, yeah, Eddie Van Halen almost joined Kiss. According to Gene Simmons. Paul Stanley says, never happened. But Gene says it did, or at least he talks about it in other articles. And I'm sure, what did he have to lose to disclose that information? It's just interesting rock and roll folklore. And, would have been kind of weird to have Eddie Van Halen in the band Kiss. In any event, that's my video, and I'm sticking to it. My name is Dave. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Smash that bell if you want notifications on new videos. And yes, you can join Patreon for just $1 a month. That's all you got to do. $1 a month. You won't miss it. You'll help build the channel. And of course, if you want to communicate with me, that's the best way to do it. You can talk to me over on Patreon. And I typically get back to folks fairly quickly because this is my life. This is what I do. So thanks again for watching, and I'll see you soon.